project coordinator of this EU project, which is a consortium project that we also implement with 3 other partners in Germany, in Italy, and also in Greece. Before I will introduce you to our guests, allow me a personal reflection on this topic. Yesterday, I was at an event, and this event was for high school students in southern Germany, and the event's name was Ask an Expert. The people who get invited there every month are former students who talk about what they work, how they came to this job, and what actually their work life looks like 15 years after they finished this high school. So I spoke there to my 15 years previous me's, and I held a presentation on labor exploitation, on what it is to work in this field, how a job at an NGO looks like, what the International Rescue Committee does. And there were thousands of questions I got asked. One question was how I came to work this and whether I knew with 18 that I would like to do that. Another question was from which countries people come from who experience labor exploitation in Germany and why it is so difficult to get out of that. A third question was about my salary, how much I earn in that job. Um, uh, One of the last questions was from a young student, a young woman, and she asked, "Excuse me, sir, when you say that in the European Union there are 600,000 people affected of labor exploitation and forced labor, yet alone in Germany 100 to 200,000, how comes that we have never heard about that?" And I think this is a very good question. And maybe this is also a question that you have wondered. I know from the registrations, many of you work in the same field as I do. We are concerned about the same topics. And yet, when we open the newspapers, when we follow political debates, we wonder how comes that this topic is so little covered. Not only in Germany, also in Italy, also in Greece, and also in other countries of the European Union. Luckily, we do not have to ask this all by ourselves in our own offices where we work locally, but we have these formats where we can discuss these topics together and also learn from experts who not only asked this question to themselves, but they were also brave enough to try with their organizations something completely new. And we have the luck that they will also share with us what they learned, what worked well, what maybe didn't work so well, and what we can take out of that for our own work. The first speaker of today is Kim Weidenberg. Kim Weidenberg works as the project manager at a service center against labor exploitation, forced labor, and human trafficking, and she's dialing in today from Berlin. Kim will also explain us what the service center exactly works, and she is not new to this field. Before, she worked as a political advisor at the German Bundestag in the German parliament, and you can also read from her reports and analysis about these topics from the last 10 years. So, Kim, welcome to this group and to this round. Our second speaker will be Daniela Gebhardt. Daniela is the head of the education department in a museum in Berlin, and it is called the Nazi Forced Labor Documentation Center. This museum explains to Germans and other visitors in Berlin and to the visitors of the museum about the history of forced labor in Nazi Germany. And she does this very dedicatedly since she is one of the co-founders of this museum, and she makes time today to talk about this museum and how she connects the past with the present. Welcome, Daniela. The third speaker is Simon Stöckle. Simon is the bridge between these two organizations. He really is. When I met Simon, he worked as a facilitator, a workshop facilitator, and he provides tours, guided tours through the Nazi Forced Labor Documentation Center. Today, and you see it already in his background and his name tag, he also works as a project officer at the Service Center Against Labor Exploitation, Forced Labor, and Human Trafficking. So he works in both organizations and will talk about how these two organizations created something new together and how they raise the awareness on labor exploitation among those people we try to reach, those young students who wonder, how comes I never hear about this? And he will talk about formats to change this, so to make our topics more relevant to other EU citizens who live and work with us. Kim, please kick us off.
Thank you so much, Philip. Thank you for having us. Thank you for organizing this webinar. I'm very excited to have a chance to speak here and present a little our work. And also, as you said, a very important issue, which should be highlighted a lot more as it is today in Germany, as well as all over Europe. I will now start my to raise awareness and they can be used in civic education as well as other training materials. And then we will shortly go to the workshop concept, and that is the bridge that we will have then later on about forced labor in Germany during the Nazi era and today. And then I will hand over to Daniela. So the Service Center, who we are and what we do. We're not that old, actually. We're founded in 2017, funded by the Federal Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs. We are operated by Arbeit und Leben Berlin-Brandenburg, located in Berlin, but we work all over Germany. And the Arbeit und Leben is actually a joint education organization of the German Trade Union Confederation and the adult education centers, the so-called Volkshochschulen, which also gives you an idea where we come from. And the Service Center works nationwide, and we support all relevant actors in a mission to strengthen and expand public sector's cooperation structures to address labor exploitation and forced labor. And these are our four main working aspects. First, the access to information. We have a database for specialized counseling centers, and we prepare information leaflets for people affected in a number of languages, and we do also adapt this to the need of the authorities or the colleagues in the counseling centers who say they need new aspects or new languages. We do research and documentation. We do a sector analysis of indicators for forced labor. We already did 6 sectors which we looked at, and we do an overview of support structures in Germany to point out what does exist, what doesn't exist yet and has to be created or expanded. We do training and raising awareness and on and offline training concepts. This is a very important aspect of our work. To all relevant work, this is counseling centers, law enforcement, authorities, but also a number of other authorities within, which are important for enforcing the rights of affected people. And we do networks and exchange. We support all the structured corporations, national and also international wise, mainly in Europe. This is just one very brief picture. So these are our leaflets. We do the access to information in simple language, which can be handed over if our consultancy colleagues go out, but also if, for example, the custom services go out to their controls, they can take it with them, and if they have any suspect, any idea if there may be affected people, so they can hand it over. And in this field, this blank field, the regional consultants can be can do their address, so that they can find afterwards, and people can go there and seek help. So far, we have 13 languages, but this is always on change. We have research and documentation. These are what I said, these are the sector analysis. This is just one very short, brief idea what we do, and you can find more on our website. So let's talk about forced labor and labor exploitation in Germany. And to give you an idea, I would start, and hopefully it works, a short movie. It's about really 10 minutes. Give me a brief sign if you can see the picture properly and you can hear the sound. Yeah, it's about 10 minutes, and we can briefly talk about it afterwards. This now you should be able to see it. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah. So this was the story of Martha and Liang. And what you already, I think, can see there, what we usually do is talk about their situation and the factors. How did they end up in being exploited? Because they had, as you could realize, very different ways. Liang from China and Marta from Bulgaria. The two persons are, as we see it, they're not victims. They're strong characters, which had an idea about what they wanted to do, but they were actually, they were lied to. They were came in a situation of coercion and with compulsion. They went into a situation with the debt that Liang had in their home country, and Marta, which was in a quite difficult psychological situation, and had a clear goal. She wanted to earn money for the gravestone for her son who died. So very different situations, and as you could also see, they had some structural vulnerabilities, which the exploiter then used to keep them in their situation. And we don't have so much time here to talk about that, but I would love if you take that with you and think about also in your daily life, what situation are there, and maybe where you can find people who are in such a situation. We talk about later what maybe you one could do that. So going back a little bit, step back to the theoretical overview. So what is forced labor? And I present you a very old definition, which is from the International Labour Organization in the year 1930. And this is where the definition is any kind of work or service that is exacted from a person under the threat of any penalty, or for which the person has not offered himself or herself voluntarily. So it's quite broad, and it was exactly like that confirmed in the year 2014 in an additional protocol, which Germany and a lot of other countries signed in 2014. So here are already some aspects meant, so which is very important for us, and to show you next picture is to get a little bit clearer that we have there are numbers of people in such situations of forced labor, and to distinguish a little bit, to make it a little bit more visible, what are the differences between, and you can see here a sign like a pyramid, which we use to talk a little bit about the differences between what we call openly consensual unfavorable employment. So there are problems in employment, and our colleagues in the consultancies about labor rights, they have that in their daily work, that people come and say, I don't get money for the time I really work. I've got problems with my situation at work, with the hours, or also the time is not really paid as I work. So they have a lot of problems. This is possibly civil law claims. So this is under civil law. And if there are some indicators coming, we talk about criminally relevant exploitation, about exploitation under criminal law. And this is differently made in the paragraphs in our countries. We have 3 important paragraphs in Germany. So this is the paragraph for forced labor, for labor exploitation, and for human trafficking, for labor exploitation. So we've got 3 important paragraphs that we are working with, and you can see here, this is the little tip of this pyramid. This is forced labor, which is then ending in exploitative working conditions involving threats of violence, coercion, or deception, or others. So it's important to distinguish this, so we do not talk just about environmental labor exploitation. Is also political, of course, a political phrase. We really talk about here about criminally relevant exploitation, labor exploitation, or forced labor, or also human trafficking for forced labor. And oops, I go backwards, sorry. So, and now you think, okay, so you're saying this, we do have that. So what were we talking about? So this is complicated because, as we already said a number of times, it's not visible. Victims of exploitation under coercion are rarely visible. This has a lot of reasons. We do have the time about that, but it's really important that the numbers here, for example, that we present you, this is from 2012. There's another report the ILO, so the International Labour Organization, did in 2022. So every 10 years around, there's a new report on estimated labor exploitation worldwide. But in 2012, they had it exactly, they had an estimation for the EU, and they said at that time there are 880,000 people affected by forced labor under criminal law. This is really important. So that includes forced labor, labor exploitation, or human trafficking for forced labor under criminal law. And this includes 610,000 for forced labor and 260,000 for forced prostitution. And this is the relation like 70% and 30%. I just want to see that, because for us, it's important to see that forced labor is relevant and is really hardly seen. And we can say about that, if we calculate it down for Germany, we say estimated 100 to 2,000 affected people in Germany. And if you say, oh, that was in the year 2012, it changed a lot. Yet it did, but the number were rising and not getting less. So this is a very conservative estimation, we believe, and we think it's probably more affected people. So we say around 100,000, 200,000. And then if you see the reported, which means the Federal Criminal Police Office does a national report on human trafficking for all exploitation forms in 2024. This is the latest one. There were 41 cases reported, including 171 victims and 60 suspects. You can see there is a huge gap between these reported people and unreported people. And this is what I want you to notice, because this is very important for us, because we want all affected people to get visible, and also to get access to their rights, which I have. So talking about the sectors or the industries, I think it's not very different in wherever you are from the other countries. So we do have the agricultural sector, we have the construction sector, we have the gastronomies, we have the cleaning sector, the care sector, the postal services. So and there are a lot lacking, I do not mention now. So there are really a number of industries who are affected, and where labor exploitation is taking place. So now maybe the thing what we are interested in most is, how do we try to make this more known in the society, and what our methods and tools for awareness raising and civic education. We do a lot of trainings, and as the movie you already have seen is of course one of the tools we use, and we work always with real cases, which are as told by our colleagues in the consultant services, of course anonymized. And one of the tool we developed right recently is the so-called scrolly trailing, and I might show you quickly. It's in German, but you just can see how we do it, if it works out. Lacrima's story. I try to open it for you. If not, I go on our website. They are on our website. You can access that publicly. You can see it. These are here the people, the affected people, die Betroffenen. And we did.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you can't see it?
No, we can't.
Do you see it now?
Yes, now it works.
Oh, I don't know why I have to stop it. Thank you, Simon. I try to do it, and I hope it works if I do it here. Yeah, you can see we work with Avatar. We try, because we think it's a very good, it makes it very or a lot easier to take the place of these persons. So she said she comes from Malta, and that she speaks quite good Bulgarian, but not so much English. And She was coming to Germany, work in the clearing center, but a good offer, and not for us actually. She said it was €8 per hour, but at least for her it was a good. But then that was while she was ending up in a room with 10 people, sleeping on the floor, and she was brought to work with a person she did not know, and ended up cleaning in offices. This is also difficult because the cleaning work takes place mainly in hours where people are not there, like in authorities. They work at night, and other offices, and that's why they're not seen. And then she didn't get proper money, and then she's asking, what shall I do now? Okay, this is we have got 5 stories of people we were recording, and this is how we try to make it a lot more visible, and also to make it possible to be more empathic about their situation. How did they end up there? So try again. Sorry, it's a bit complicated, but I hope you still enjoy following me here. And I try again here. It should be that. No, this is the Lacrimas story. I try again.
Ich würde den ganzen Bildschirm teilen.
Ja.
Und dann einfach.
Ja. Okay. I close that. And try again. Wo bin ich?
Parallelly, I
Yeah,
have
sorry,
also
sorry. Yeah, just take over for a while.
I have also your presentation on my second screen.
Yeah.
Would you like me that I share it?
I think it's okay. Because for me it's a little bit easier. Is that do you see now? No, if
Not
not,
yet.
then might be it's better that you
Right.
Do you see it now?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
You just tell me
Okay.
when to continue.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Of course, of course.
I hope you're still with me, and you still can follow. It's like it is.
I see people nodding.
Thank you. So kind. So this is another tool from actually the same stories that we recorded, that we were developing for the Customs Authority, which are a very important authority for identifying affected people at their workplace. And we developed an e-learning tool with different stories, and also explaining the labor, the not only the labor rights, but also the victims' rights that they have, and where also the authority has an important role, like all law enforcement authorities. So this is the last I will try to show you. I hope it works out. Let's see. We have another short movie, but it's just 2 minutes. Do you see that? Do you see that? And as you might seen, it's in short, you could really say it's with identification, counseling, and support services. And identification actually can occur in many places by government agencies, as here happened with the customs services or police, or occupation safety authorities or others. But also very important for us by counseling centers, labor law counseling, specialized counseling centers for criminal law and others, migration counseling centers, and also in social facilities like hospitals, shelters, community centers, meal programs, and also, of course, by colleagues at work, by customers in restaurants or during packing delivery, or strangers even. If you realize that there are some difficult situations, that people do look like frightened or not well equipped for their work, except and others, and do not really speak the language of your country. These are all signs which might be important, and then it's very good to know how or where they maybe can seek help. I think I would now hand over to you again. If that is okay?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Also,
Thank
thank you
you.
for sharing the insights about your organization and also showing two videos in different formats that clearly show the reality we often talk about. Daniela, you have a very similar, if not same topic, but in another chapter of German's history. Please tell us about the documentation center you have co-founded and also what people can expect. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Philip, first of all, for your invitation to take part in this webinar and for your nice and friendly introduction. And thank you to all participants who are interested in that webinar. We are a lot of people, and I'm really lucky that so many people are going to take part in that or are taking part now. So also me, I have brought a presentation. I'll gonna share with you. So let's see if this works now. Do you see it the right way in the
Yes, we
presentation?
do.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, I brought with me two parts of my lectures. First of all, I'm going to introduce the documentation center and our work, and then I will give you a very brief overview about Nazi forced labor. First of all, the center opened in 2006 at the historical site of a forced labor camp in Berlin. The aerial photo of the forced labor camp is from 1945, and you can see the historical site there very well. Civic engagement from various groups had been successful after 10 years of struggle and discussion to have the barracks listed as historical monuments and establish a documentation center there at the historical site. An international advisory board recommended directing the focus of the documentation center towards the history of civilian forced laborers for whom there was still no central place of remembrance in Germany. This historic union that almost all the buildings have been preserved. 11 of 13 of accommodation barracks are still standing, plus, so these are the accommodation barracks, and this one here hasn't finished at the end of the war, until the end of the war, and this is the main service and administration building in the center of the camp. The camp's location in the heart of a residential area, you can see this maybe here and here. These are normal buildings where German workers lived. So the camp's location in the heart of a residential area is a perfect illustration of how omnipresent forced laborers have been in Second World War. So I go on. At the historical site, now you have a view inside of our main exhibition with a workshop. At the historical site, we offer different permanent and temporary exhibitions, various events and discussions, lectures, and a wide range of guided tours and workshops for pupils, students, and adults. Our work is funded by the cultural authorities of the country of Berlin and the German Federal Republic. And within our work, we have developed several programs on the subject of Nazi forced labor and labor exploitation, e.g., forced labor today. One is for school pupils, and we developed it because one of our first pupils visitors group brought that perspective in. So one of our first groups that ever came to visit the documentation center was a pupils group, and they had questions about forced labor today. And so we developed an offer. It's a 4 hours workshop, and we cover both topics in those 4 hours. And the issue of labor exploitation today is explored primarily through products and objects that are closely linked to our everyday lives. And the questions we are asking are who manufactured the components of my smartphone, who harvested the tomatoes I eat, who made my clothes, and under what conditions does this take place? I have to admit that this program isn't often asked for, so I don't know really why, but we only have some very few bookings for this program. We also offer international youth exchange, and the topic of today's labor exploitation is not part of the standard offer, but occasionally covered in a 2-hour workshop based on the ILO definition of forced labor. And as you already know, we have developed another program in collaboration with the Arbeit und Leben Service Center. And it's a 1-day workshop. And parts of it Kim already showed you and had introduced you into that part. And the other part is about Nazi forced labor. And I'm going to explain a little bit what we do in that part and what we focus on in that part. And we start Nazi forced labor part. So in this 1-day schedule, we start it's always taking place at our historical site, and we start with a guided tour around the historical site. And during the tour, we give information about the historical site, but also first facts about Nazi forced labor, and especially on the history of civilian forced, because this is our main focus of our work. And as second step, these facts are explored in a greater detail and supported by historical sources in learning packs. But to give you the brief and really rushing through introduction about the facts of forced labor, I will start with that. For affected various groups, but the main groups are prisoners of war with around 4.6 million people, civilian forced laborers with around 8.4 million people, and concentration camp inmates and so-called labor Jews with approximately 0.7 million people. Looking at the figures, if we take all 3 groups together, 26 million people worked for the Nazis in the German Reich and the occupied countries. In the German Reich alone, the figure was around 12 to 13 million people, and the civilian forced laborers make up the largest group numbering with 8.4 million people. 50% from those came from Poland and Eastern Europe. The civilian forced laborers were predominantly residents of German-occupied European countries who had been deported under various coercive measures only to bring them to work. But even before the Second World War started, people were forced to perform hard labor, for example, German Jews, Sinti and Roma, and so-called anti-social or work-shy Germans. Just to give you the whole picture, I'd like to mention also those groups. Forced labor was carried out on the basis of the following key considerations. First of all, the ideology of racism. It has a decisive influence on the chances of survival to those subjected to forced labor. For the Jews and Sinti and Roma mentioned above, the forced labor was followed by their murder in extermination camps. Even in the case of civilian forced laborers, the living conditions were determined on the one hand by the Nazis' racist ideology and the resulting racist attitudes with German society, and on the other hand, by the national origin of the forced laborers themselves. So we have to turn the page. This becomes very clear when one takes a closer look at the living and working conditions of Eastern European workers and Poles compared to their better off counterparts from Western Europe. Whilst forced laborers from Western Europe were able to move freely in the towns and villages, received better food rations, and were paid more, forced laborers from Poland and the Soviet Union were marked with discriminatory insignia such as the P, you can see here, P badge, and the Ost badge. This was an order by decree, so everybody had to do this. And also by the decree, they were paid less, given less food, and kept under stricter guard because they were deemed inferior, and the authorities want to segregate them from the German population. Mixed blood was undesirable. The German bloodline was to be kept pure. So we are still covering the basics. And the war itself was a major reason for the use of forced laborers. As war dragged on, more and more German men were sent to the front, and they had to be replaced by other workers to go on, especially with the armament production. The war could not have been continued from the late 1943 onwards without the deployment of millions of forced laborers. So another reason was, another central point about forced labor in the Nazi time was that forced labor was state-directed. Virtually all government departments and administrative bodies were involved in the deployment of civilian forced laborers. Examples include the employment office and, at a higher level, the special authority of the General Plenipotentiary for Labor Deployment. Institution that was especially found to organize civilian forced labor. And sorry. Again, why were entire age groups and village communities were deported to perform forced labor? The first reason I have already mentioned. They were urgently needed in the industry, and secondly, to provide for the German population. It was not only that companies needed forced labor, also the German population was as whole that benefited from the use of forced labor. So who harvested my tomatoes, i.e., in that case, maybe who harvested the grain for the bread I eat. And to go on, to give you a definition, the historians use for civilian forced laborers. Civilian forced laborers were unable to terminate their employment, had no free choice of workplace, no free choice of place of residence, would exert no significant influence over their employment conditions, nor did they have any influence over their living conditions. This is a non-economic definition. However, economic coercion also existed, in some cases also state-directed, for example, in Poland, where factories have been shut down, so that there was a large number of unemployment people, and some of them went to work in the Reich because they had to earn money for paying their life. Was in Germany supposed to be volunteer workers, which was not true if we look at our definitions we work with. So where did they have to work? You found them in all sectors: domestic, religious, commercial, the armament industry, as already mentioned, the food and clothing industries, construction, agriculture and forestry, mining, municipal cleaning services, bakeries, bread factories, breweries, and you can go on and on and on and on. In some companies, they made as much as 60% of the workforce. And as a rule, they were assigned the most physically demanding work with bigger food rations, poor hygiene, and virtually no medical care. To give you a better example, I brought a quote from Vera L. She was a union forced laborer, was deployed near Berlin. We were girls working 12 hours a day, including night shifts, with neither stockings nor shoes. We were given only wooden clocks. The food was poor. We were given soup, either with rutabagas or spinach. Half the bread was made with soda, and we only had jacket potatoes on Sundays. Have noted there are many women in the photos I showed you already. It was not all men, but also women and children who were used for forced labor. They came mainly from Poland and Eastern Europe and accounted for more than half the Ostarbeiter, the Eastern workers, so about 1 million women. The situation of women differed in many ways from that of men. For instance, they were paid less, and their lack of legal rights made them easy targets for sexual assault by German men. Pregnant women from Eastern Europe pressured into having abortions, and any child born went over to care homes for children, where most died as a result of systematic neglect. Around 1.5 million, mainly from Poland and the Soviet Union, were deported to forced labor in the German Reich. Children as young as 10 and in some cases as young as 6 were put to work. Babies and very young children up to 3 or 4 years often died of exhaustion and malnutrition during the transports and shortly after arriving the German camps. And at the end, I'm going to present the number of deceased forced laborers. Of approximately 8.4 million civilian forced laborers, around 500 died whilst performing forced labor as a direct result of it. Of approximately 4.6 million prisoners of war, around 1.1 million died, mainly from the Soviet Union. And of the 1.7 million concentration camp prisoners and so-called labor Jews, around 1.1 million died whilst performing forced labor. So this is my very brief overview about the history of forced labor, especially the history of civilian forced laborers. And I'm going to hand over the word to Simon Stöckler. And I have to finish my presentation, which I don't know how to do now. I have found the button.
Okay, good morning also from my end. Can you see my presentation already?
Yes, we can.
Amazing. So like Philip already said in the beginning, I work as a project officer in the service center as forced labor, but I'm also a freelance guide in the document center on Nazi forced labor, and it's involved in the two iterations of our workshop. So I will talk a little bit more about the details of our common workshop. So the workshop takes place once a year during November. Everybody can sign up. During this year, we have been around 20 people from different ages and different backgrounds. So why did we work out this workshop? As my colleague already said, that when I do tours and presentations, and my colleagues visit us questions with the question, what about forced labor and labor exploitation today? Comes up oftentimes, and it's an obvious link to the present. It's not the only link to the present, but one of the obvious one. And so you can say even in the path focus format, the issue of modern forced labor keeps coming up. On the other hand, when we do trainings with the service center against forced labor, many participants associate forced labor today with forced labor during National Socialism. So many do this by drawing analogies. Others say forced labor isn't this something of the past? So you can say that both in the work of the documentation center as well in the work of the service center, we have to maneuver through the topic of connecting the past to the present. So this made it really natural to take a closer look and to analyze this with a more sophisticated approach and also draw from each other's expertise in doing so. So while in the workshop, we're of course using different more pedagogical methods, like looking at biographies and cases of individuals to make the cases and the biography more visible. The second part of the workshop is more scientific, so to speak, in the sense that we are doing what normally historians do when they do a historical comparison. So we're looking at the specifics. We don't equalize forced labor during National Socialism and forced labor today. Instead, we draw a real comparison, and that means we look into the specifics. We look, okay, where we can find similarities, where can we find differences, and where can we find continuities. Of course, the risk in that comparison is to trivialize forced labor during National Socialism, but this also would at the same time mean that we would trivialize today's forms of labor exploitation. Because if we miss both, we don't know nothing at all. Yes, so in this picture, you can see some of our results from the last year. So also what I'm gonna show you now, I will give you some insights to our results, but it's not our results, it's more what the group of the last year developed on their own. You can see we're doing a lot of we're putting terms on small papers and putting them on flip charts in order to comparing small phenomenons and small aspects of the both systems, National Socialism and forced labor today. Also, we're speaking a lot about different definitions of forced labor. We put on 3 dimensions of comparison. I will show you this to you now. And the 3 are the state's responsibility, private companies, and last but not least, scope of action. Scope of action is meant in a really broad sense. So what could employers do to improve the labor situation? and also what can forced laborers do themselves to improve their own situation, and also what can third parties do. Like if you look at the past, it was the German population, of course. How could they behave in their coming together with forced laborers? But today you can say it's like, what can maybe civil society institutions do? And while it is true that during National Socialism, the state was the main organizer, the key player, so to speak, of forced labor, um, which of course doesn't apply to today, is also maybe put too short to say it was the only one. So you already heard that the private companies, they played a big role in the National Socialism forced labor. And they also were just not following orders from the regime, but they were designers of the forced labor system themselves. Like, for example, you could have a company on one side of the street, company A, where the people had really bad living and working conditions. And on the other side, there was company B, which where the people were treated in a better way. So the scope of action for the factories during National Socialism where was really big. There was a really big leverage, and one of the most key factors on how the living and working condition of the people was. I will now show you some of the results of last year's workshop. So yeah, we have for the first part of the workshop, we are looking at National Socialism. We put on 4 working groups, and it's always like people from 3 to 4 people, that groups of 3 to 4 people who are looking at one of those working group. And I will read out which are the groups. The first one looks more closely at recruitment and forced deportation. The second one looks at sectors, profiteers, and state organizations. The third one looks at the ideology of National Socialism, so to speak, meaning racism and the idea of Volksgemeinschaft, people's community. Put it really short, it's like the understanding of a really ethnically imagined nation. The Nazis would have said a racial nation. And group 4 looks at vulnerable groups like women and children. And just to give you an example, I will show you now what the group that was looking at recruitment and forced labor and forced deportation found out. So what my colleague already said is that there were different forms of recruitments in National Socialism. In the beginning of the war, it was based more on free decision, although I will put it in really big quotation marks because, like Daniela said, the people have in every case had financial or economic hardships. So even in the beginning of the war, if they applied for work in the German Reich, it wasn't really on free will because they had economic hardships. But in the beginning, there were the state responsibility in the reforms of recruitment was, for example, that the German Arbeitsamt came together with the Wehrmacht to the occupied territories and advocated for working in Germany. So you have to imagine they put on posters, or they were officers advocating for work in Germany. They were giving false promises. So they would tell the people, you can come to Germany, you will have a time-capped contract, you will earn money, and after that you can go back. Once they were there, they couldn't go back. They couldn't end their contracts on free will. So it was a false promise. But there was also a radicalization in the forms of recruitment. So in the later stages of the Second World War, this wasn't the case anymore, this form of recruitment. There you have to imagine just transporters of the German Wehrmacht blocking the roads, blocking squares in small towns or villages, most and for all in the Soviet Union. And the people were just brought to the German Reich with only their clothes on. So in this case, there was no decision at all. So this was the state. So the state's responsibility in regard to recruitment. The private companies, although they played also an important role there, because they also were involved in propaganda in the occupied territories. So you really can imagine there were posters from German companies like Siemens in the occupied territories that advocated for working for Siemens, for example. And of course, the private companies also had a demand for the labor. Like Daniela already said, you heard it, the German men were in war, so the economy was growing basically because of the war, and the people, the factories and the entrepreneurs, they needed more and more labor during National Socialism. And of course, the private companies also violated the contracts. Like in the beginning, when the people were shown contracts that were time capped. Once they were in the German Reich, they couldn't end the contract on their own, so the companies were violating the contracts. And if you look at the scope of action for the forced laborers, of course, in the beginning, there was, although it wasn't an autonomous decision because there were economic hardships, there was a little bit of free will. But in the end of the Second World War, when it was only forced deportations, raids, so to speak, of course there was no decision making at all. Of course, the people could decide to escape or to resist in many forms. This also happened a lot, but of course it was really dangerous for them because there were heavy punishments for those. So now we'll talk, in the second part of the workshop, we're doing basically the same with forced labor today. So we're looking at forced labor today with our 3-dimension of comparison, the state's responsibility, private companies, and the scope of action. I will read out some of the things that last year's group developed. Of course, nowadays, the state is not the main organizer. It's not the key player in the system of forced labor. Instead, it is not fulfilling its responsibilities to fight against it. So there's lacking implementation of international requirements. There's lacking implementation of victim protection. And there's not enough political will to fight subcontracting structures, which of course is an important context for exploitation nowadays. And also the state is withholding work permits for migrant workers, which is also an important context. Private companies have hardly any general contractor liability. Like the general contractor is not held accountable for what the subcontractor does. Of course, there's profits through exploitation, obviously, and recruitment agencies play a really important part in that. And of course, there are loopholes in the law, for example, with insolvency. So the companies it's easy for the companies to not be held accountable for their crimes, basically. But the scope of action nowadays is, of course, completely different compared to National Socialism, right? Like we as NGOs or institutions, we can make people visible. We are allowed to. We can raise awareness and education, and we can also give information for the affected of labor exploitation. Like we can inform them about their rights. We can counsel them in counseling centers. And of course, to some extent, forced laborers or affected of labor exploitation nowadays can, in theory, mobilize and organize. So I will not read everything here out loud, but just to give you some ideas of what the conclusion might look like. Here you can see some similarities the last year's group found and some differences. And I will just get into detail of some of those. A similarity, I think you already recognized it maybe, is deception. like bringing people with false promises to Germany. Also, there's a lot of ignorance. Of course, the majority population during National Socialism was ignorant towards, in many, many cases, or the majority was, towards forced laborers. And also today, there's a form of ignorance against this phenomenon. You can also find continuities. For example, many people, many forced laborers during National Socialism came from Eastern Europe. So those were the biggest groups. And also nowadays, it is one of the biggest group of people in labor exploitation, inside and outside of the European Union, like people inside the EU and outside of the EU. They come from Eastern Europe, also Central Asia. This is one of the biggest groups nowadays as well. And also racism, of course, this you can see as a similarity, but also as a difference. I will go into that in a minute. So now when I talk about the differences of National Socialism and today's labor exploitation, when you look at National Socialism, obviously it was state planned and organized. Today, though, it is mostly organized through private companies. So there's a big difference. Also, the political system is of course, completely different. If you look at National Socialism, it was a dictatorship. Today, we have a democracy. Yeah, and when talking about racism, during National Socialism, there were obvious racist laws that were defining people as being a member of one certain group and then having a whole list of different regulations. Because of that reason, you remember the badges, for example. Nowadays, of course, there's also racism, but it is more structural, of course. And maybe you could say it's more subtle or hidden in many cases. And one main difference, of course, is the Second World War, right? Today, there's no war of extermination from the Germans against the Soviet Union, which, of course, was the main context of the deployment of forced laborers, as my colleague already mentioned. Another difference, I think, really important that nowadays there is a civil society. So we are allowed to put awareness to this, and we are allowed to put political pressure on decision makers in order to combat forced labor. Of course, this wasn't possible in that form during National Socialism. So to draw a conclusion, we're looking at very different societies and systems. Maybe one similarity in the systems is profit, right? This plays a role in National Socialism, but also today, capitalism. But if you look more into the specifics, you will find or recognize many of the same mechanics. Like, for example, the deception or the idea of bringing people with false promises to Germany. So you will find similarities. You will also find continuities. Maybe if you look not to groups like the Jews or the Roma or Soviet prisoners of wars, but to civil forced laborers, you will find more similarities, obviously. Yes, I think I'm done with my part. So I will give it back to Philip. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon, and thank you also to Daniela and Kim. You have heard now 3 presentations where you experienced and learned on forced labor, labor exploitation in Germany. Not only today's labor exploitation, but also in the past, during the Third Reich, Nazi Germany. And we now have also 20 minutes of time to discuss what we heard. So thinking about our topic, how to raise awareness among the public, you've seen different examples, such creating short movies and showing it to the public and foster discussions. You've seen workshops held in museums to also learn about the past of our topic and how it is connected with one country's history. Simon, you also explained where similarities exist, where differences. You heard that there are school classes coming to learn about labor exploitation. We can all discuss this, and allow me to open the discussion with a first question from my side. Kim, Daniela, and Simon, who wants to answer, please go first. I wonder, we in Berlin, we have a very lucky situation that this museum exists. And I wonder for our peers living in other countries of the European Union, and also for our peers who maybe not live in a metropolis where there are so many offers and you can easily connect. What would you say? What would be a first step to raise awareness? Or what would be a good tool, a good starter, when you want to bring this topic a bit more closer to the public? I know you do also public speeches, public events on this. What is something as a tip that could be also done in other countries, in other cities in Europe?
Who wants to be first? I maybe I just start, and I think some aspects we already raised here. Of course, I mentioned it quickly. I mean, it depends if you in which area you are, and what kind of tools you can use. But of course, we do a lot of online courses. As you said, we have the movies, we have our website, and we put all what we have online, and mostly all, not totally, but mostly. And we are in a very good situation because we can send all our material free of cost to every place. So everything that we have online can be ordered. And then also we try to reach out to multiplicators and say we can give you material like teachers or professors or any kind of educational space. So of course you have to give something to hand it out. But this could be first steps on a low threshold to reach out to any kind of educational space.
And Daniela, you can add, and
Yes.
to the public here, if you have questions, please raise your hand, and then we will have a line, and then you are free to speak. If speaking is currently not a good option for you, you can also put them in the chat, and I will pick it up for you. So please also join our discussion and bring in your questions. And meanwhile, Daniela, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just can support what Kim already said. I think digital tools would help a lot of going on in presenting the topic. So maybe you could start also some social media campaigns to gain more attention to the topic. This is so we have a social media person in the documentation center, and since then, because civilian forced labor at the Nazi time is not very well known topic in Germany too, so since then we have a better spread. So this could be something you could create lessons, digital lessons, as we do now, and maybe you feel encouraged because you already took part in such a lesson. And I think it would be not so difficult, hopefully not so difficult, to find partners. So if you create a digital lesson, you can find a partner that not has to be your neighbor, but maybe is located in the next town. And so maybe there's also a museum that deals with history. You can ask them to connect. to have another spread. Yeah, that would be could be some first steps to go on if you need some more people going on together with you. And I just can tell you that we have several partners nationwide, but also at Berlin. And this helps a lot to bring along our topics and helps also to develop new topics or new lectures, as we did together with Kim and the Servicestelle.
Right, thank you. And the next question comes from Vera Taube.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, my name is Vera. I'm from THWS, which is a University of Applied Sciences in Bavaria. And I'm teaching in an international master degree, and we focus our summer school on the topic of labor migration. Not labor migration, well, forced labor and labor migration, both. And I would like to add to your question, Philip, that maybe it's not only creating awareness for the victims of the trafficking. I think that we, like, coming from social work, I'm usually thinking about like a broader dissemination. So maybe we should also talk with everyone about, if you buy things very cheap, if you get your food delivery for basically no money right to your door, if you go out for having dinner and you pay, I don't know, €5 for this heap of French fries and whatever, someone has to pay the price. So, because there's also the customers who somehow fuel this kind of labor exploitation by not being willing to pay what things are worth, what labor is worth, or what things are worth. So maybe that's also something we have to keep in mind, that we also have to address like the general public, the consumers.
Yes, Kim.
Thank you so much, Vera. And I love always to hear that in special places this issue is taken up a lot more. We didn't talk, so because we don't have time, so much about the connection, of course, of migrants, labor migrants, and of course labor exploitation. But to your special point, I just would like to add or to have a little remark that of course there is a responsibility of the customers always. At the same time, I would not underestimate the structures who really do this workers, this exploitive workers, invisible. And the structures and the exploiters, the employers do a lot of effort to make them invisible and to keep them in their groups, that there is no mixture with anybody who speaks a different language, and to keep them in different places or to move them around. So it's not easy. It's very important to celebrate that it exists. And if you have, as I also said, you can of course meet people who are exploited at the restaurant, etc. But you can also never be really sure about their situation and what is good for them at that point of time. So it's very important to know what can I do then, to think a little bit more about that, and then to enforce political decisions who really could make a change.
I have a question to that also. So talking about the responsibility of customers, this is also something I wondered in the discussions. Kim, what do you say to those, or Simon, Daniela, let's say in German newspaper 2 weeks ago, I think we had in Zeit magazine, a big weekly newspaper, a long report on labor exploitation and food delivery with cases. And I think many readers of this article said afterwards, I don't want to order food anymore at this company that was portrayed there. And that is quite something realistic, also to avoid a restaurant. At the same time, we know we have massive labor exploitation cases in construction sites. What do I do as a private customer, if I realize my house was built by affected workers? Do I move out, or where is the boundary here? And how also can we communicate in a constructive way, though, that it's not directly so overwhelming?
Yes, maybe I may start. As we cooperate with the Servicestelle, we learned that it might be a good way to help to send people to that Servicestelle so that they can people involved in the process of labor exploitation and forced labor today, so that they can have become help there. When we started our work together, I always was a little bit like, yeah, but we have to go to the restaurant owner and say to him, why you do exploiting your workers? You can't do that. Of course, I will not go in a restaurant like that anymore when I recognize that. But I learned that it makes much more sense to give the people themselves the possibility to have a service stelle and to go there to learn about their rights. And the cases, the people that went to the Servicestelle get help there also defending their rights. So this is what I learned in our work together. What do I say? People coming here. We have, as Simon already said, we have people going very fast into comparisons about forced labor today, and I tell them that there are possibilities to inform better, for example, in the internet, and I tell them to behave like that when they want to do anything. So what I also always mention is because everybody has put his smartphone, and people we have seminars or workshops or guided tours are doing like that on the smartphone, and I can give a hint. Yeah, you may have small research in internet who is exploited to that you have a smartphone you like to pay very less money for. So we can do that as a very direct reaction, or as a more a direction to give people a little bit like guidelines. Yeah.
Thank you. Sarah Amiri has the next question. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. One of the Vera's student, the master student in THWS. Actually, my question is kind of related to three stories we've seen during this seminar. But my question is like, three of them has two things in common, and one of them was like the boss still working and hire people, other people, and the other one was like, and three of them was still waiting for the result. I mean, they have to wait, I don't know, 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. I mean, there is no assurance that if you go to police after 2 weeks or 2 years, you can get your money back or something like that. So if even we raise awareness among immigrant and refugees people and make them to go to police and take their rights back, but there is still something like they would be jobless, homeless for, and I don't know for how long. And that's why I really sometimes feel like maybe I can relate it to just stay at that job. At least you can earn money. You know what I mean? So yeah, that was my question. Thank you.
Shall I just get back to that quickly? I see we have a number of questions also in the chat. I don't know if we are able to take them up all. I make it very quick. Of course, sorry, of course, you're right, and I do really share also your worries. To make it very brief, we always were saying it's important to get there, to make them visible. This is also a political issue, of course, and to make them then to consult them. What are their victims' rights? That's also Daniela said. And the victims' rights are that they have a right to stay to a certain residence permit, to see if they want testimony, if they want to go to the criminal court. And they have to write, it's a so-called reflection period, for example, and it goes along with social assistance. So there are a number of rights they have. They're also within EU laws, which Germany implemented. And so this is what we are actually talking about, so that they can do that and can go the way. They also can decide how far they want to go, or if they want to seek new work, for example. And then, of course, better paid work, because a number of them actually are really trained workers. So it's usually what I think, it's really no sense at all that people are exploited who are really needed in Germany at all, in our society, and usually highly welcome. So this is one point, and a big point also is, I really have
Kim,
to admit
could
that.
we have only this one point?
Okay,
Now,
I just want to talk
I
about
have a
labor
very
rights. Yeah, do so.
unpopular role. My
I
unpopular
know.
role is to call out the sprint of the last minutes. So for the next questions, dear speakers, please try to answer within a minute or 1.5, just to give us a glimpse so we can go through all the questions. Julia Lauter had a question in the chat. I think, Kim, this goes to you, so you can also read it with me, posted at 11:37 German time. The question goes, in Germany, there is a first draft of a bill on strengthening the criminal prosecution of human trafficking and sexual exploitation, as well as implementing the EU Directive 2024/1712, which could strengthen the criminal prosecution of human trafficking. And as far as she knows, this could ensure that also the use of service provided by exploited workers could be prosecuted under criminal law. So I think, Kim, this is to you, asking Julia, what is the service center's position on this? And are you somehow involved in drafting of this law?
Quite brief, we're not involved, and it's very limited. It does not say that in all sectors, if we use things protected by forced labor, it's usually meant if they're imported and they were produced with forced labor, and it's complicated, like always, to prove. So it will exist, and we will see if how we can also use it for our purposes. But so far we're not involved, and so far I am a little bit skeptical if we'll really do a change in the system.
The next question was from, I think, Pavlina Filipova. At least, Pavlina, I saw your hand was risen. If you want to share your question with us, then go ahead.
Okay, I will be very brief. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we hear you.
Thank you for the great presentations, very interesting. And I will echo my colleague Ernesta from the Anti-Trafficking Commission, who is writing in the chat. What I want to add is that here the civil society sector is working with the people who are going to Germany to work. And those are people from vulnerable groups, especially Roma communities. And our awareness and educational campaigns are more focused on teaching them or getting them know what are the conditions and what to expect in Germany. What I see as a gap is that we do not have a lot of and very efficient connections with what you are doing and what we are doing here with as a country of source and not as the country of destination like Germany. And probably my suggestion for the future is partnerships, more partnerships, and more connections between us and you, in order to improve this awareness and to make it more preventional. Because as you told the customers, okay, in some sectors like the construction work could not react, or it's not that efficient. But in my point of view, it's much more efficient to do a prevention work. And of course, more efficient labor inspections and the role of all these treaties and the function of the state to monitor and to sanction such companies who are employing and exploiting people from different countries. That's my comment, not question.
And thank you for your comment. And for context, there was a comment from Bulgaria. We are at the end of time, almost. Please do not drop out now, but instead, please support me and the Thais partners for the coming webinars. We have 10 minutes left, and I have an offer for you. The first 5 minutes, you will give us quick feedback where we learn what you take from today and how you liked it and what we could do better in the next webinar, because this is a webinar series. And therefore, and this is my offer, in the last 5 minutes, you will learn where all of these sources you heard you can find, and what we will plan to do in future and where you can find us. So if you have 5 minutes time, please give us your feedback now on this session, and then we close together. Domniki, you have a question while everybody else is filling out the form in the chat.
Hello. Actually, it's not a question. I just wanted to point out that for me it was really enjoyable to have seen some videos and some pictures and a way to have some kind of images when it comes to this line of work. I think it's helpful to be able to embody the feelings as well as, take the information in. So for me, it was very helpful to keep up with presentations that were more, I don't know, inclusive to all the senses. Thank you.
Thank you.
Shall we do with all the questions coming up? Yeah, I'm so sorry that we don't have a time. We have to repeat that, Philip.
I agree. Okay. Let us find a closing all together. I see the last people are still writing, so take a minute. You can also fill out the feedback form a few minutes later after the session ended. No matter when you do it, either now or in 10 minutes. I appreciate very much if you give feedback to us, since we are always trying out different formats, and only you know in front of your screen what worked for you well today and what didn't. Me and Kim, Daniela, and Simon, we can only do assumptions. As said, this was the second out of in total 6 webinars that are hosted in the TICE project, and you can find the video recording of the last session, and also you can find the video recording later of this session on our website. The website is anti-traffickingresponse.org. You see it here, and you can explore our website, and you see here at different educational videos and webinar recordings. This is the first TICE video recording, also at IRC's other projects on anti-trafficking. Here, for example, REACH. We also have here webinars. You can find different sources and orientation videos from the International Rescue Committee on our work. You also find here, this is the newest article we published on the situation in Greece. Today you learned about Germany, but we also publish about trafficking situations in Greece and in Italy. This report came out 2 weeks ago, and also other kinds of ways to identify and raise awareness. So this is a website to you. Please also explore the website of the Service Center Against Labor Exploitation, Forced Labor, and Human Trafficking. This website is available both in English and in German, and they have at least as many resources, or even more, than we currently have at antitraffickingresponse.org. And also, please visit the website of the Nazi Forced Labor Documentation Center. You will find the links in an email that I will send you soon to your address you registered. Once you registered, you gave us the permission to provide you everything that you saw here, also in via email. And there you will have also the contact details from Simon Stöckle, Kim Weidenberg, and Daniela Gebhardt. I know from the 3 of them that they would love to receive emails from you. So if you have an idea and think, well, maybe we are not in German, but still, could we do something with them? I see they're already nodding and laughing. Their answer is yes. This webinar is also a format where we hope that it fosters new connections or deepens the ones that already exist. So please, after you press the exit button, do not be a stranger, but approach us. And of course, I would also love to hear from you. Thank you for today. My name was Philip Mitrowski as the project coordinator of the TICE project. I'm closing here now, and I wish you, wherever you are in Europe, a wonderful day, and wishing you also keeping up the good work we all do across the countries of Europe. Have a good day.